From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kevin Merida.
Good afternoon. We have quite the treat. We have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar with us. So as you know, it's a cliche, but he really is somebody who needs no introduction. He is the NBA's all-time leading scorer, and a Basketball Hall of Fame inductee. But since retiring after 20 years in NBA, he has been an actor, a basketball coach, and the author of 11 books, many of them New York Times bestsellers. We're here today to talk about Writings on the Wall, Searching for a New Equality Beyond Black and White, which is his latest. Kareem also is a columnist for Time and the Washington Post, where I worked for 22 years, writing on a range of topics, including race and politics, age and pop culture. In 2012, he was selected as a U.S. Cultural Ambassador. But I kind of come to look at him now as really quite the public intellectual, a brilliant man with brilliant insights on these times. In 2004, I was still at the Washington Post, and I'll just tell you a brief story. Right now, I am editor-in-chief of The Undefeated, ESPN's relatively new digital platform that focuses on race, sports, and culture. Thank you. But I was working on a book in 2004 on Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, and I went to the NBA All-Star Game in Los Angeles, and I wanted to get athletes with cultural insights, thinking that might add a dimension to the book. I came up to Kareem, I didn't have any scheduled interview, and I asked him about Justice Thomas. And no offense to athletes in general, but I wasn't expecting this really cogent assessment. There was Leon Higginbotham is the late federal judge, and he had written this really tough critique of Justice Thomas that had been circulating among law students, and as one of my lawyer friends said, it was like fire on the wild prairie catching on and burning, and people were talking about it. And here was Kareem, who knew about that, and he gave quite a critique, which was included in my book. And I left that All-Star Game thinking that this was a really well-read man. I'm really proud to be here and to have this conversation with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and let's get going. How you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Thank you. So, this book, Writings on the Wall, why this book and why now?
Well, this book is basically my take on what's going on in our country right now. We're going through a very divisive time in our republic. And it concerns me because it seems like Americans are not talking to each other, they're talking past each other. And that's not in our tradition, and it's not very healthy for our nation. So I'm very concerned about that, and I decided to put pen to paper and talk about it.
You write in the book that a lot of the world's misery can be attributed to people being ill-informed, uninformed, misinformed?
Oh, absolutely. People who have problems to solve really need to know what the facts are. And when you don't take the time to acquaint yourself with what is actually going on, not what people's opinions are, but what actually are the facts. When you're not fact-based, it's hard to find your way out of the woods. You really keep running into misinterpretations of things and situations that have to be dealt with. And it makes it very difficult to get anything done.
Well, we're at the National Book Festival, so we know there are lots of readers here. I know you mentioned that, you read all the time. You would read, when you were a high school athlete and college athlete and a pro athlete, leaving games on planes, reading books. Is that kind of the foundation of, that's something that's missing, you think, in this country?
Yeah, I think even people who don't have the time to read can be informed just by turning on the TV and making sure they look at a couple of news broadcasts and get a few different takes on what's going on with the current events. And that really should prompt people to do like a little bit more in-depth, ask a few more in-depth questions about what's going on and why, and it enables them to figure out what their take on the solution should be. But people who don't know what's going on and who can't really describe how things are affecting America, it's impossible for them to contribute.
So we're in the final months of this historic presidency, the first African American to be president of this country, Barack Obama. You talk about something you call the Obama effect. Maybe explain that.
Well, what I call the Obama effect is the fact that when President Obama was elected, people thought that was the end of racism in America. After all, we picked our chief executive, the person who's our leader. We picked an African American. And people thought that, geez, that means that racism is over. And it was a significant milepost, but it was not a sign that said that we've reached the end of the road and racism is over. We still have a lot of work to do. If you check out what Dr. King said about looking forward, some of the things we had to deal with, they're still very much affecting life in America, and we still have to deal with these issues.
Recently we've seen protests, certainly in Charlotte and in other places, related to police shootings of African Americans. How do we get past the tension that we're seeing here in this country related to that subject?
Well, I think the only way that we can get past the tension is to acknowledge a few things that historically we have not been able to deal with because they're very disturbing issues. The fact that blacks and other minorities are often dehumanized in the eyes of the average citizen, the average white citizen, and that stereotypes and generalizations about people of color, different factions of the minority communities around here, they don't really understand them as people. They see them as objects, they see them as exotic creatures, but they don't see them as people that have the same tendencies and the same desires as anyone else. They kind of see them as exotic creatures. Too often, black people are seen as beasts of burden who now have become citizens. We were brought here to pick cotton and work on farms. We were not brought here to participate in American society. And once that happened, it created a situation that we are still living with and still having problems with.
There's an interesting debate that seems to have taken place now at least in the political sphere, where there have been these shootings, of course, of unarmed black men, and then there's a whole other, people say, well, what about black on black crime? You addressed that. I just wanted to read something briefly, which I thought was really smart. You said the current card trick of politicians and pundits is black on black crime, which they use to show the real problem isn't white racism, but blacks attacking each other. The not so subtle suggestion is that black problems are black society's own fault because they can't control their own people. Black on black crime actually makes the opposite point because it's a byproduct of centuries of interning blacks in economic gulags.
Exactly. The fact that black Americans cannot access the mainstream of society means that they're forced to desperation. And the only equal opportunity employer for desperate people is crime. You don't have to have any qualifications. All you have to do is be willing to do something illegal, and maybe you can make a few bucks doing that. And too often, blacks and other minorities, that's the only access they have to making any money. And this is unfortunate. It's a failure of the educational system to prepare them to participate legally in our society. It's also the effect that the destruction of the black family has had. Black parents spend so much time trying to keep a roof over their families' heads and food on the table that they don't have time to go to parent-teacher meetings or help Junior and Little Miss with their homework. And again, the educational system fails these children, and they end up having kids too early and seeing that crime is the only way out for them. And this situation repeats itself. There's more or less a pipeline from the public school system to the prison system. It's very unfortunate and very unnecessary, but it's going to take a supreme effort to actually cure it and eliminate it from our society.
Everybody knows you as this great athlete, your leading scorer. I know some of your records have been broken, but that one hasn't been broken yet.
Right.
But yet you've spent all of these years really kind of in the world of the mind. I've been always struck by your perspective as an athlete, and I can't really think of many athletes who have that kind of deep perspective on the subjects of the day. You talked about the issue of class and inequality in your book, and specifically that, there was this passage where you said, if I had been a foot shorter, I might have been a history teacher trying to figure out at the end of my career if I'm going to have enough money and can I retire now? When, as a basketball player, your last year, people showered you with applause and gifts and gratitude and all of this appreciation, and just that sense of, does everybody here in this country have the same shot at success?
Well, that is a very real issue, and people who don't have that shot at success really have to struggle to figure out how they're going to make ends meet. That this is a very commonplace issue for too many people.
How do we solve that?
Well, I think the only way to solve it is to see to it that economic equality is something that we champion and something that we support. There have been a number of studies more recently that show that the increasing of the minimum wage really has benefited a lot of people and enabled a lot more families to do better. And I think that's something that really needs to continue to happen.
What do you think about today's athletes and the role that they play or should play in forcing social change, the kind of influence that they can have? We've certainly been having this discussion ever since Colin Kaepernick, first sat out the national anthem and then took a knee, and we've been debating the role of athletes and influence. What's your perspective on that?
Well, I think that professional athletes have a great platform to use, especially if they want to use it positively. I remember when I was a kid, so many of my heroes and people that I looked up to were athletes. And in those days, they didn't have anything to say politically. But, that's changed. And I think that doesn't have to be a bad thing as long as those athletes understand that they have a responsibility. They are role models. And whether or not they've been listening to Charles Barkley say that he's not a role model, that doesn't matter. They have to understand that they have a responsibility there. But if they get that, they can do a lot of good.
Who are the athletes you admire the most today?
Well, at the ESPN Awards, I was really happy with what LeBron and Carmelo, Chris
Must be some
Paul,
friends of ESPN out there.
yeah, and D. Wade, they got up on stage and made a very poignant and effective statement. And they didn't do it in a destructive or hostile manner. I think that's the only way that this platform can be used effectively, because when people ignore what the message is and just focus on the fact that they had a very hostile attitude, that destroys the effect of the message. So I really was pleased with what they did. One of them, Dwayne Wade, he just lost a cousin to gun violence in Chicago. It's a real issue.
It was a day after we had a town hall. The Undefeated sponsored a town hall, and that he participated on.
Yeah.
And it was just 5 minutes away from that town hall.
Right. Michael Jordan has become involved after sitting out for so long. He's decided to get involved. He's donated money and spoken up. Again, someone that a lot of Americans admire and respect, and they'll listen to him. So I think that this platform can be a very useful tool in helping change take place by giving young people an idea of what they can do and the best way to do it.
I kind of wonder, there's an iconic photograph, and this surfaced a lot, particularly after Ali died, of the Cleveland Summit, and you and Jim Brown and Bill Russell and Bobby Mitchell and others gathering around Ali. This is after he had resisted the draft, 1967. And everybody remembers that scene. It was kind of a representation of really prominent athletes gathering around a prominent athlete. I kind of wondered whether we would see something like that after Colin Kaepernick. What are your thoughts? Prominent athletes gathering around in a similar...
Well, I think what Colin did really has given a lot of the players in the NFL an idea about how to use their platform. So you saw demonstrations on a number of NFL fields last Sunday of teams. For example, the Seattle Seahawks, they came out locked arm in arm, black and white players, showing some solidarity and voicing their concerns. So, Colin's example really has really served as a wake-up call for a lot of professional athletes to maybe think about doing something of that nature on issues that concern them and that they feel need to be discussed. And I'm very happy that that happened.
For the early part of your life, and that goes up to college, people knew you as Lou Alcindor. And you write about your conversion to Islam. And I thought maybe I would just read a short passage. You said the transition from Lou to Kareem was not merely a change in celebrity brand name like Sean Combs to Puff Daddy to Diddy to P. Diddy, but a change of heart, mind, and soul. Mine was not just a simple conversion, but also a spiritual transformation. I used to be Lou Alcindor, pale reflection of what white America expected of me. Now I'm Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the manifestation of my African history, culture, and beliefs.
Exactly.
What has been, to carry that a little further for the audience, what has been the impact of that transition for you to where you are now?
Well, in going through that transformation, I felt that I assumed an identity that was actually me, and that related to what I saw was my history and my heritage, and my American heritage. Muslims took part in the Revolutionary War. A lot of people don't understand that because they don't have accurate records, but a lot of the slaves that joined the Revolutionary Army were Muslim. And some of them gained their freedom by fighting in the Revolutionary War. And also there were Muslims that fought with the Camp de Lafayette, Moroccan Muslims, that fought with the French contingents of soldiers that helped win the war. So, you know, Muslims participated in America from its very first inception. The very first country to recognize the United States as a sovereign nation was the Kingdom of Morocco. People don't realize that. So, you know, Islam has had an interaction with our nation, and Muslims have been part of our nation from day one.
History, we really love history.
Absolutely. History is a great teacher. If we don't, what Mr. Santayana said, Mr. George Santayana said, those who do not understand history are condemned to repeat it. And we've made a lot of faux pas in our historical efforts at times. So, you know, we have to pay attention to what we have done in the past, because we can use the successful efforts as a template, and we can also use the unsuccessful efforts as a warning not to repeat those mistakes.
So you've, as a writer, and certainly you're a writer of books, but you write columns, and some of them are very provocative, and you become a journalist like me.
Yeah. Well, I was a journalist starting way back in 1964. I actually worked on a newspaper, community newspaper in Harlem, but I was between my junior and senior year in high school, and I was writing.
And you also, as you note on that end of it, you said your Facebook page is like a magnet, like a super magnet for racial slurs, that there's a lot of that kind of feedback.
Oh, I get a lot of negative feedback, but if you're an author and you express opinions that people feel are controversial or not exactly according to their taste, they're going to let you hear about it. But I must say I get a lot more positive feedback than I do negative feedback.
Good. What's your next book?
My next book is going to be a discussion of my 50-year relationship with my college coach, John Wooden. We had a very long and wonderful relationship that lasted up until he died. I was with him just 3 hours before he passed away, and I had known him since 1965, and it was a wonderful experience, and I'm going to share it. The book is in the process now of being written.
All right. I think we want to go to some questions now. If you have some, line up, and Kareem will take them.
Start. Okay. You spoke that you said that if you hadn't been 7'2" or whatever, you've been a foot shorter, you may have been a teacher. I think if you've been a foot shorter with your intellect, you've probably been an all-time point guard, doing great. So, but with that being said, you mentioned earlier about our school systems failing our young people. What's your thoughts on the charter school systems?
Well, I think that the school systems here in America had American high school students #1 in all of the really crucial and important disciplines that schools teach up until somewhere in the 60s. And then we started to fade away when people decided that they did not want to spend the money to support integrated schools. And that's when the public school system started to fail. And we've got to get over that. We have to get back to where we spend the money. There's so many great teachers who don't teach because they can't support their families on the salaries that they're offered. And now they're working for Google and Microsoft and places like that. So it's my sincere hope that the school systems start paying the teachers what they need to be paid, because they've done a great job over so many years and given us so many capable and wonderful people coming out and doing all the things that people do here in America, because this is the land of opportunity. So we got to get back to that and not be afraid to support these efforts, because they've been successful.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you so much for being here.
My
It's a real
pleasure.
thrill, at least for me. You mentioned that you're a student of history, and I would be really intrigued to know who are some of the history biography writers that you admire and respect and have been your favorites over the years.
Oh, geez, that's a tough one for me, because I've read so much, I don't know where to start with that one. Ron Chernow's book on Alexander Hamilton is probably the most recent one that I read that really enlightened me and helped me understand a lot more about our nation and how it was formed. I go back to that one because it was brilliantly written, and it really explained so much about America. I've read a really good biography on Jefferson, and I'm forgetting the author's name, so you have to forgive me on that. The autobiography of Malcolm X was a book that really helped me understand my place here in America, and it started my interest in Islam. So those would be a couple of books that I've read about historical figures that really have helped me grow and learn.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Two questions. First, are we going to get another Mycroft Holmes novel?
Yes, we are, because my publisher is begging me to do another one, so I got to work on that one, and going to have to wear a couple of hats to get all this work done, but yeah, we're going to have to do something about that.
Okay, and then my second question is, with there being such a rich tradition of African American detective novels, when writing a detective novel, why did you choose to base it on the Sherlockian Mycroft Holmes area of detective fiction?
Well, I really enjoyed Chester Himes' writings about Harlem and the two detectives that he wrote about in some of his works. But the very first detective novel that I read was the complete works of Arthur Conan Doyle. So I kind of started on that, and then I kind of graduated to other things. And I just felt that I would pay an homage to Mr. Doyle, because he really started it all. Well, actually, Edgar Allan Poe started it all with the murders in the Rue Morgue. But Arthur Conan Doyle got on that train and did a great job. So that's why.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was just wondering, as a mother of teachers, and my son-in-law got his PhD in abolition, I began to read history books. I'm a product. I graduated from high school in 1964. And at that time, I remembered elementary school, how I was taught about the Emancipation Proclamation. And then I read the book Slavery by Another Name. And I was very disturbed with the misinformation that was taught to me in my youth, because slavery did not end with the Emancipation Proclamation. Slavery didn't end until the mid-1940s. And I was just wondering, how do you feel about that? The way we were taught and what we were taught, it was slanted for the white history. And the black history wasn't really taught to us the way it should have been. So how do you feel about that, the misinformation that was taught to us in our youth?
Well, I think that misinformation really is based on just a reluctance of Americans to call a spade, because they would say that once the Emancipation Proclamation came into effect, that slavery ended. Well, a certain type of slavery ended, but after the Civil War, black Americans were arrested and incarcerated and then made to work on chain gangs, and it was the same cheap labor that had existed prior to the Civil War, but they were working as convicts instead of slaves, but it was the same deal. And that's what you were referring to, that lasted up into the 1940s. And then there's still a remnant of that happening, and it's, you know, the way that the school systems now just channel kids to go from failing at school to our prison system. That's still happening, and there's no more need for cheap labor. So, you know, it's the same thing. They put a different mask on it, but it's the same phenomena, and it's something that has to end in our country. And I think that this type of institutionalized racism is something that we have to let go of. It's like a drug for our nation that we just can't let go of it. We can't allow all of the potential from all of the different ethnic groups in our country to blossom until we get rid of this institutionalized racism. And I hope we do that.
Hello, my name is Brittany. You said that your inspiration for writing this book was because you felt like, given the national conversation, that we weren't actually having conversations with each other, that we were talking past each other.
Yes.
And I feel that in my group, there are a lot of people like me who are very willing to have that conversation at first. And now I have a lot of frustration and find that my Facebook friend count is significantly lower than it used to be. So my question for you is, how do you recommend we have that conversation? And are there some people and some situations where the conversation is not worth having?
Well, I would just tell you to be patient. And I would just remind you that when we tried to form the Constitution, the various factions from the various states at times hated each other and wouldn't talk to each other. And they were totally frustrated with the ignorance and lack of awareness of some of the other factions. The people from Vermont thought that the people from South Carolina did not know anything, and vice versa. And that could have been said about any of the different factions. But finally, they got around to talking to each other and listening to each other. And you have to be able to listen, and you have to be able to speak with respect and patience until the other side listens. And if they don't want to let go of the ideas that they have that are destructive, then there's not much you can do about it. But it requires patience, and it's amazing how long it takes before consensus is achieved. But it's something that's worth waiting for. If we hadn't done it, we would not have this great nation and the incredible document that is called the United States Constitution.
Thank you.
It's a thrill to see you. It really is. How love respect for you as an athlete,
Thank you.
growing up in the 80s and whatnot.
Thank you.
Recently, they had the documentary about O.J. Simpson that was on there, and you were talking about sitting it out. And there are athletes out there that, at least me as a fan, have viewed as have sat out things. And I guess my question is, in the 60s, as an athlete, you're a brand, and speaking your mind can damage that brand, especially if you're, an athlete of color and whatnot, or at least it seems like there is that possibility. So when you did join up with the other athletes in the late 60s, early 70s, and you spoke your mind, were there any costs to you as far as that goes? And what is the cost to athletes who do sit it out?
Well, athletes who have the nerve and the courage to speak out, their brand is affected in so much as that people who don't appreciate their point of view might not support them. But also, in addition to those people, you will get support from people who realize that you actually have said something meaningful. So, you lose on one hand, but you also gain on another hand. I lost a lot of access to, let's say, commercial viability because I was known as maybe being a troublemaker or somebody who spoke about issues that most people found uncomfortable and difficult to speak about. But we have to speak about these things. Someone has to talk about them. And if you're going to be able to affect any change, you have to take that risk. You have to be able to risk what's going on. Muhammad Ali risked his career. He lost 3 of his most productive years where he could not fight because he was stripped of his title. But what he had to say about the Vietnamese War became what our country ended up standing up for, and the fact that the Vietnamese War was unjust and illegal. And we finally got behind him on that issue. So it takes that.
Yeah, I believe it'd be refreshing if some of our elected officials showed more intellectual prowess and less gamesmanship. And I was wondering whether you have ever considered, or would you consider, running for elected office? Also, would you care to comment on the current contest going on for the president?
I comment regularly on that in my column in the Washington Post, so you could read that. And I think that we're coming to a very crucial election here. Americans are going to make a decision about who's going to lead their country. And I hope that they inform themselves and vote their conscience in a meaningful way and do what's best for the country and not what's good for partisan gain. I think if Americans are really concerned about that, they will do that. And I hope that's how it works out.
Thank you, sir, and I loved your game.
Oh, thank you very much.
Hi, Kareem. Hi, Kareem. So I go to school in the South, and I'm pretty visibly Muslim. So I was just wondering, how do you deal with dialoguing with people with not only questions about your blackness and about how you deal with racism, but also about your Muslimness and how you deal with Islamophobia?
Well, for me, I just, if people are interested, I explain to them what Islam is all about and how it's helped me, how it has been a moral anchor in my life and enabled me to tell right from wrong, and how the Prophet, one of the things that the Prophet Muhammad said was seek knowledge. If you have to go from here, which was Arabia, to China, which was the furthest place away from Arabia that the Arabs knew about. So we have to go to great lengths to educate ourselves. And that's how Islam has affected me. And it's enabled me to have a moral anchor that has served me very well. And that's all you have to explain. And your life and your presence will speak all the rest to people. They'll be able to see what your worth is and your value just by the way you conduct yourself. So just follow your moral compass, and I'm sure you're going to end up being okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Wa alaikum salam.
About 30 years ago, way back when, I saw you, I heard you speak in Auburn University in Auburn, Alabama. I don't know if you remember way back when. Never mind. But anyway, I asked a particular question. And I don't know if you remember the question or you remember the experience, but I'm going to ask the question again. With you traveling around the country and seeing certain kinds of things over the years and experiencing, let's say, down in Atlanta, the Sweet Auburn district in Atlanta, the Black Wall Street in Chicago, and the Harlem Renaissance, all of these experiences have been diminished with the advent of, I would say, once we decided to integrate into mainstream American society, we lost a lot of those historical values. And what, in your opinion, is the legacy of those districts that we lost, the Sweet Auburn district, the Black Wall Street, and things of that nature?
Well, I think that those things that you just referred to, Harlem and Sweet Auburn and the Black Wall Street, they were a result of the segregation of our society. And now that our society has partially enabled people of color to succeed, those neighborhoods have become abandoned, and all of the most successful people in those neighborhoods have left. So that's really what the decline of those neighborhoods represents. And I don't think we're going to go back there until unless and until Americans want to resegregate themselves. I don't think that will happen. So I think that's just a nostalgic thing. I miss Harlem. I was born and raised there,
right.
And I know what you're talking about. But I think we have to move on.
Move on. That's right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yes.
A few months ago, in June, the Supreme Court heard a case called Fisher versus Texas, which had the potential to end affirmative action policies in this country. But by a mere one-vote margin, they upheld the constitutionality of it. So affirmative action is allowed to continue. What are your thoughts on this decision?
Well, I think that some type of affirmative action is necessary to heal some of the wounds that have been inflicted on people of color in this country. It doesn't necessarily have to come at the expense of denying other people opportunities. But I think the affirmative action in this country should be an educational effort in poor communities, especially poor communities of color, where lack of educational opportunity really is something that is damaging those communities and does not allow them to thrive. So, we can't hold people who are alive today responsible for things that happened 50 and 150 years ago. That's why I've never been an advocate for reparations. But we can educate the people who are the survivors of that, who are the descendants of people who were victimized in those times. We can get them up to speed educationally so that they can participate in the American society and raise their families and do the good things that they have the potential to do. Yeah. Yes.
Hello, my name is Vernon Allen, and I'm a freshman sports medicine major at Howard University, a minor in journalism. And I read earlier, or like years ago, about how you said that basketball was more of a hobby and writing was like what you were really passionate about, and that was your career. And that's something that I'm really interested in as well. And so in doing that, I watch a lot of sports shows. And I was watching the podcast of Undisputed where Skip Bayless said, he spoke about the Major League Baseball player Steve Kressinger, and he said that he hated the fact that he had to share the same skin tone as him because of his comments, his Twitter comments he made yesterday or 2 days ago. And I was going to ask you, this question isn't about how to feel about those who say the wrong things, but about the people like Skip who actually understand that what is being said is wrong and what's going on in the situation is wrong, but they aren't the ones experiencing it. So I was asking you, how important do you think it is for those who are not African American to speak out and be more bold about the injustice that is going on around?
Well, I think that what you have to understand is that injustice affects us all, and you don't have to worry about the color of the people who are ignorant about that. If you understand something, you have an obligation to educate that person or let them go on and continue to be ignorant and destructive. So that's on you as an individual to impart that knowledge that enables that person to correct their course and start talking about things that do make sense. So that's on you. It's on you as an individual and you as someone who cares. If you care about these issues, you have to speak out. And don't worry about the color of the people that you talk to because we're all neighbors here. Whatever color that you are, the people around you are your neighbors and fellow citizens, and some of them need to be educated. So you have to take that personal responsibility and accept the consequences. And if you don't get your point across, you did try, and that's all you can do.
Yes, sir. Do you mind if I ask one follow-up question? Could I ask my follow-up question? The National African American Museum, the new one opened up today, and it's my teachers have talked about it, and they said that it starts basically with African American slavery into the modern era, but everyone knows and understands that African American history begins before slavery, and I see the museum as more of trying to stick to the political stigma of museums as far as educating about, you start with what we think is the worst into something that's good, but we don't understand that things or respect the fact that there was more or better things that were a part of African American culture before slavery. So I was going to ask you, what do you think of the significance of that museum, or do you believe that there should be more added to it?
Well, I haven't had a chance to check the museum out, so I don't know what's in there. But just the fact that they have an African American museum, if there are problems with it, they can be fixed. That is a common thing with museums in any place that deals in public education like that. So whatever's going on over there, it can be fixed eventually. And if you find something wrong with it, make sure you go down there and let your voice be heard.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, in a recent conversation on race, someone mentioned to me that they felt with the election of Obama, certain forms of racism that were maybe covert, that people wouldn't talk about, were more vocal on their opinions. And that kind of resonated with me when I thought about it. And I didn't know if what you thought on that statement and the impact of that.
Well, it should be obvious to anybody. Look at all the opposition President Obama has had to deal with trying to get things done. Look at how much he could have gotten done. Look at all the things that he could have gotten done if he had not been opposed at every turn by the Republicans in Congress. They really don't like him. They called him a liar while he was trying to address the combined members of the House of Representatives and the Senate. It's been pretty obvious that they resent the fact that a black man whipped them twice. And I think our country has suffered because of that resentment and the way that they tried to speak around the issue that, he has some good ideas and they wouldn't work with him, so they decided they would work against him. It's very unfortunate, but that's what we're dealing with. We're going to have to shut this down pretty soon, so I'm going to take 4 more questions, and then we're going to have to move on. I hope you can forgive me, but we do have time constraints here. Okay, so we'll do 4 more questions. Yes.
Hello, my name is Ariel Adams. I'm a freshman legal communications major at Howard University. And I just wanted to ask, I have 3 siblings, they're all younger than me, and 2 of them are my brothers, and I don't know how to get them to understand what's going on in the world because, like you said, they're products of the public schooling system in the South. So they don't know what's going on or they don't understand it, and they really have no motivation to educate themselves about it. And I don't know how to get them to see it without, I don't know, like slamming it in their face. So how do I, just explain to them and get them to have some motivation about doing better?
That's a very difficult thing for me to answer because I don't know them personally. And you've reminded me of the statement that ignorance is bliss. That's a very unfortunate thing for your brothers. So there has to be some way that you can point out to them through practical and obvious examples how ignorant they are and how that ignorance is hurting them. That's the only way that you can do that. And it's going to take an effort on your part. I don't know the specifics in your family, so I'm not trying to generalize it. But it's going to take a significant effort on your part. But I'm glad you care about them. I have written the very first book that I wrote after I finished my basketball career that had nothing to do with basketball is called Black Profiles in Courage, and it is an overview of African American history. And I think by putting some knowledge in front of them that they can relate to, that might help them broaden their perspective and get a better idea on things. So you're going to have to put some books in their hands. And from what you described, they probably don't read, or a lot of people who are very hostile to education sometimes are dyslexic. And maybe you might want to check that issue out with them also, because that affects a lot of people. You'd be surprised how many people who are jailed are dyslexic people who are angry about the fact that they couldn't learn in school. So that might be an issue, but good luck with that, and I hope that you get some success there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
Hi, I'm Anaya Harrison. I was in the elevator with you, but my question is, what would you say to young African American teenagers like myself trying to navigate in a world where innocent Black people are being shot and there's still a lot of racism going on?
Well, the thing I tell all young people, regardless of race, is that knowledge is power. So do the best you can to get the most thorough and complete education that you can in whatever field that you feel is appropriate for you, whatever your tastes dictate on that issue. And just go out in the world and do the best you can within the area that you have some reach at. So the people that you encounter and your family members or other people that you work with or hang out with, make sure that you spread that light, because knowledge is power, and just accumulate all the power that you can and share it with the world.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi.
Yes.
Yes, my name is Susan Shapiro. Thank you very much for speaking today. I am presently writing a book with a law enforcement agent to try to change the mentality of police officers. And we want to get into the elephant in the room. And I was wondering if you could give some advice on what is the core of what we need to teach.
Well, I think the elephant in the room is the way that they have stereotyped people of color, especially black Americans, as being prone to criminality and ignorant. And in addition to being ignorant, being stupid and unable to learn anything. It's a process that dehumanizes people of color. And the police force think that they're not dealing with people, but they're dealing with animals, and that brute force is usually the easiest and most effective way of dealing with people of color. You have to get them to the point where they understand that these are people who have been victimized by the dictates of our society that have been so prevalent for over 2 decades, for over 2 centuries now. And until they understand that and have some compassion, they will continue to treat them like they're animals that need to be brutally led around.
Well, this one law enforcement agent is determined, and he has the access to get it into the schools, and he is going to hopefully be a spokesperson for this. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Good luck.
I think we only got time for one more.
We're only going to have time for 2 more questions, so. Yes.
Which do you like better, basketball or writing books?
Oh, that's very easy. Right now, I like writing books because I'm in no shape to play basketball anymore. And if I write books, I get people like you come and they ask me questions, and some of them read my books. So I'm very flattered that you asked that question, and I hope you read 1 or 2 of my books. Thank you.
Kareem, thank you so much for coming today and for contributing your voice to these very important conversations. It seems to me that our society and the world at large, these times are becoming more divisive and very vitriolic. And what I was wondering is, how do we do better? Because there are people even on the progressive side of the aisle who claim to be for unity, but who seem to incite divisiveness. And it's easy to point the finger at the other side, but what can we do better as individuals and as a movement and as a society to close that gap and to become better?
Well, my whole issue on that is just have some compassion. People who are just locked into their own point of view, it takes a greater effort to get through to them because they don't want to hear anything else. And you have to be patient enough and persistent enough to get through that wall that they put up around their point of view. And they're going to hold on to it no matter how much evidence that they have that point of view does not work. So you have to have the patience and the determination to work your way through that. And it takes time, and sometimes it doesn't happen. But whoever that is that you're referring to, I hope you get through to them because it's really having a bad effect on our country. And we got to do something about that.
Right. I mean, I'm sorry. I was more referring to, like, we lack a unifying voice in our generation, like a Dr. King, a voice for peace and a voice that brings people together. And it seems like most of our national dialogue is around who's at fault and how can we point the finger at the other side. And how do we get back to that unifying voice, and how do we get back to that one nation standing together against, you know, the evils of the world instead of one nation standing in divisiveness against itself?
Well, you know, Dr. King wasn't always a unifying voice. Dr. King offended a lot of people. But the people that Dr. King offended were trying to hold on to points of view that were very detrimental to our nation. And you just have to be able to break through that. That's all it is. It takes time and it takes repeated effort, but we can get there. We would not be here at this point. If you look out in the audience, it's a rainbow. We wouldn't be at this point. When our nation was founded, it was for white males that owned property. women weren't allowed, people of color weren't allowed, and it was only about white people who had owned land. So we've gotten a great distance. We have a great distance to go, but we can get there. It's just going to take patience. Is this, are we done here? There's another short person there. All right. How you doing?
What is your favorite part about writing?
My favorite part about writing is when I get the book finished. It's it takes a lot of effort to write a book, and when you finally get finished, it's like you've had a baby. But this baby can live much longer than the average baby, and hopefully people will read it and be motivated by it. So thank you for your question. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great.
Okay. Thank you very much.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.